He ran one of the biggest empires in the sporting world. The Maple Leafs, the Raptors, Toronto FC, the Marlies, the Air Canada Centre, BMO Field, Leafs TV, NBA TV. The list goes on. Now he has written all about it in a book not surprisingly called Dream Job. And we welcome the former CEO for Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment Limited, Richard Peddie, to TVO. Nice to have you here.
Nice being here. Thank you.
You are, I was surprised to learn in the book, not some kid who went to Upper Canada College and grew up on the right side of the tracks. You're from Windsor.
Yeah, barely got into school.
Always
university.
Your dream job to run a basketball team.
Since I was 20, one day I had this crazy thought that I couldn't play worth a lick. I followed basketball, whether it was the University of Michigan or the University of Windsor. We had a very good team in those days, a men's team. Today we have a wonderful women's team. And so I wrote in a journal, I want to run a basketball team, which I didn't realize, I don't think in 1967 when I wrote it down, that there was only 12 NBA teams. So I wanted a job, there was 12 in the world. Pretty crazy.
Well, there's what, 30?
30 now.
30
Still
now.
Pretty crazy job.
30, and you got to do it.
I did.
You got to run the Toronto Raptors. Mm-hmm. Now, the day that Toronto got the Raptors, you actually were on the outs that day, right? You were part of the group that didn't get them.
Yes, Larry and Tannenbaum and I met, and he wanted to chase a franchise. I spent Saturdays when I was running Skydome writing up a brief to give to the NBA. Larry wrote him a big check for, get their attention, and we started the process. It was fair. Two groups came in, Slade and Bitov came in. That we went through the dance, and they won fair and square, and when I thought I was this close to realizing my dream, it was gone.
It was gone, but eventually you got it.
Yeah, there was a great article in the paper the next day where this fella had lost out on a company, and he said, and I'll always remember this, they won, I lost next. So I started thinking of next, and that's when I ended up working for Gordon Craig and learning about Discovery Channel and TSN and launched tsn.ca. So when Alan Slate, 3 years later, needed a CEO, I was pretty qualified.
There you were. You ran the Skydome.
I did.
When it was called the Skydome.
When it was called. I still call it the Skydome.
Yeah,
I think I probably always will.
A lot of us do. What was the biggest challenge in running that facility?
I knew nothing about it. In 1989, I'd come out of consumer products, and that's how I interviewed too. And I was up against, one fellow I was up against was Michael Rowe, who was running Giants Stadium in the Meadowlands. And they said, why should we hire you? I said, not because I know anything about this, but I know all about marketing and sales and customer service and general management and finances from consumer products. And I don't know whether I got it for that reason, a fresh approach in '89, because the industry wasn't that sophisticated, or because there were three of us and I was the only Canadian, but I got the job.
When the Skydome was built, it was, I think, billed as one of the sort of 8 wonders of the world.
We called it the world's greatest entertainment center.
Where do you put it today on the Pantheon?
Oh, way down. It was the last really multiple-use facility. Shortly after that, Camden Yards opened, which is still to this day a wonderful baseball facility.
Baltimore.
And now, they're all basically single-purpose. Or if they're not single-purpose, they're pretty aligned. But you don't get multi-purpose. You don't do an ice show. You don't do football and that all, or concerts in the same building anymore.
When you eventually became the CEO of this massive sports empire that I described in the intro, could you please tell us what your job actually was?
Well, we had a strategy that, a long-range strategy that we talked about every November, and I saw myself as 3 objectives. Win, on and off the playing field. On the playing field, clearly, not just win in the regular season, but to ultimately win championships, number 1. Number 2, to grow enterprise value. It was about $300 million of value when I took it over. It was $2 billion when I left. And third was to make an exceptional place to work, because if you've got engaged, motivated employees, they'll do a better job servicing and selling. So those were the 3 that kept me awake at nights.
How many employees did you have by the end?
We had about 700. We started off with about 125 and about 3,000 part-time.
And did you really know everybody's name?
No, I tried. The beauty is, if I went to a meeting, we had something called that intranet site, and everyone's picture was on it. So if I knew I'm meeting with 12 employees, I could look them up and then remember.
You want to tell us what your annual salary was?
What was my annual salary? It was $1.1 million plus bonuses.
And how did the bonuses turn out to be?
They were good in most of the years. They were better when I sold the company, because there was an incentive there to sell the company, and I retired 5 weeks before they sold the company. Do
I infer that if you were doing the same job in an American sports empire, you might have made 10 times that much?
Oh yeah, very much so. In fact, you just see it in CEOs. CEOs in the United States now are being paid about 280 times what the average employee makes, and And I think what I was getting paid was like 40 times what my average employee was getting, which is the way it used to be, and the way it is closer to that in Canada. I really find the CEO salaries in the United States insane, excessive, awful.
Why hasn't the revolution begun yet? That's one of the things I often wonder.
Well, you know, this whole, boy, this could go many ways. If you study history, when there gets to be this whole polarization between very wealthy and very poor, it does rise up ultimately. So it's scary. We have to address this. 1% controlling 80% of the wealth, just, it's not long-term viable.
We'll come back to politics a little bit later. That list I gave at the beginning, did I forget anything? Those were all of your areas of responsibility.
Yeah, I think you got them all.
The teams, the TV networks, the facility, the arenas. Oh, the MasterCard Center?
MasterCard Center. Well, we leased that building. We had both practice facilities, and we had access to one ice pad. We did not own that one.
Is that the largest sports empire in North America?
Oh, well, you know, you've got some of those franchises that are worth so much money all by themselves. But Madison Square Gardens would be pretty big. AEG, where Tim Lewicki came from, very big. It's right up there, and arguably one of the most profitable too.
The assumption I suspect people have is that you, as the guy atop that pyramid of interests, have a hand in drafting players, in having a word with the coach after the game, in having a word with the players after the games. Any of that true?
No, actually it's not. And you know, it's very interesting. If you run a company, and I have a lawyer reporting to me, a CFO with a CA reporting to me, even though I don't have a CA and even though I don't have a law degree, you can go in and chat and talk about what you should do in those areas of finance and legal. In sports, you know, owners and hired gun CEOs and presidents aren't expected to do any of that stuff, not to meddle. And I took that to heart. Boy, I was never, you know, I like basketball, I like hockey, but I couldn't tell a good point guard from a bad point guard or a great point guard. So no, drafting, free agent signings, trades, no. I always knew what they were going to do. I knew their rationale. And I think why people thought I meddled when I would be interviewed on The Fan that night, I knew all the reasons why we did it. Ergo, he must know what he was doing. So no, I didn't meddle. It was interesting. I spoke at Ivy School, and someone said, well, you meddled. And I said, no, I didn't, but I wish I had.
Because?
Why? Because I think in some cases we should have done more homework. I mean, the Vince Carter trade, I didn't like the Vince Carter trade. I thought Vince had to go, but what we got in return was horrible.
We should remind everybody, you're not on the Fan radio right now. So let's just remind everybody, Vince Carter was this superstar, second coming of Michael Jordan, who you drafted
talent
for the Toronto Raptors. Yeah. And was going to break all the records and be a huge champion, and it really went sour.
It did. He had a great start, Rookie of the Year. The dunk contest, his dunks were still not repeated. I mean, just brilliant stuff. But, you know, it was a bad trade. I knew it, but I had to go with my general manager. Once you undercut a general manager, you might as well get a new one.
But you didn't like some of the people, you ultimately didn't like some of the people you hired and thought would do a good job. The guy who ran your hockey team, John Ferguson
you know,
Jr.
I didn't dislike John. He started at the wrong place. He should start with Phoenix or Columbus, not the Maple Leafs. That's not a place for rookies. That was my bad. I hired a rookie general manager, and John's resume was very, very good. I mean, I could go through all of it. Yeah, I had checked this, checked that, checked that. But again, he was a rookie, and he didn't grow the way I thought he should. But I liked him. But, you know, ultimately I fired him.
How close to the players could you get?
You know, I think some CEOs and presidents and owners get pretty close to players. I never did. Paul Beeston once said to me, he says, you know, they're just kids. You really don't have a lot in common with them. I say in my book that they were assets. So I have my favorites? Absolutely. But, you know, they're 22, and even then I was in my 50s. You know, I'm more the grandfather than their friend. Did
you ever have them over to their house for dinner, that kind of thing?
I had Junkyard Dog over in an auction.
You better say his real name again.
Sorry again. J.D. Williams.
Williams, yeah.
And he went by Junkyard. He liked to howl, bark. And in an auction, I bid on him and won him, and he came over and cooked the best ribs. Mind you, used a lot of honey and barbecue sauce, but they were pretty awesome.
No hockey players, though, over to the place?
Nope. No.
The most important decision you tell us in the book that you ever made in 14 years of running MLSE was the decision to create Leaf TV and then Raptors TV, now called NBA TV. Why was that such a seminal decision?
Well, it struck us, you know, I went to the board of directors. I remember it was a Saturday. the late Steve Stavro, who was a majority owner at that time. I thought he was going to give me a hard time on it because he really didn't get it. And I said, here's my rationale. There's really no competition in the market. TSN and Sportsnet are very cozy, and they're quite happy to split things up. I need a marketing vehicle. I could make money off it. And Steve got it that day. And I thought he'd just approved the Leafs channel and not the Raptor channel. And he approved both. And also I had a partner to come in to help share the costs. And he said, no, let's do it on our own. That was a brilliant idea because ultimately we created a 70-person broadcast team. We had 3 networks. We had experienced people. I had license. And that, I believe, Bell and Rogers looked at it and said, oh, in a couple of years, they're launching their own network for all Maple Leaf sports entertainment games. We better stop that.
So we better get in, buy the team, and take control of that.
Absolutely.
Just for those who don't know, the Leafs TV, for example, is a channel that you pay extra for to get. So what's the revenue stream on that today?
Well, I'm on 2 years out of date. Okay. It makes a little bit of money. I mean, it's not big. It was more of a stalking horse, keeping them honest. They made money, all 3 channels collectively. So there was that. It was more what we could do. We had a license ready to go in 2015 that allowed us to broadcast across Canada our games, and the broadcast rights deals for all my teams were up. So I could have cleaned out all those Leaf and Raptor games from those 2 channels, put them on my channel. That'd be a pretty powerful thing. That's NFL TV. That's Yankees TV. That's what a lot of stations have done, and they become almost. I think they would have been worth about $1 billion almost immediately.
Okay, the first thing when I asked you what your job was, the first thing you said was win on the ice, win on the court, win on the pitch. You've heard this criticism before, that under your tenure, you didn't do any of that because the people allege you don't need to. The money keeps coming in regardless. Is that a fair criticism?
Well, I think it's the most illogical criticism. Number one, no one can stand still. You have to keep growing, or that money will dissipate. But winning is good business. Winning championships is great business. I mean, they've hardly taken any price increases the last 7 years. You could have taken more if they're winning. Suites were tougher to sell. They would have been easier to sell and with higher prices. Sponsorships, getting Raptor sponsorships was getting tougher because they weren't winning. No, the revenue would have gone up with winning. It made all the sense in the world. And I always said we had it the toughest because my 700 employees and all my part-time people were fans. They felt the pain of losing just like everyone else who's watching them. But also, when we come to work the next day, the hot dogs don't taste as good. Selling that person to get them to renew the Raptors tickets is much more challenging. We wanted to win. We just didn't.
But if you oversee a company that goes from $300 million value to $2 billion in value, that does take some of the smarts out of losing, doesn't it? Losing doesn't smart as much when you're increasing the value that much.
You don't know that what's in here. I mean, there was a lot of sleepless nights. It really hurt. And, I'm sitting there at a game, and I don't leave a game till it's over. And if you're getting blown out, and I'm sitting there in section 118, 119, there's no one around you because they've all left. And when they did round, they did cat calls. And no, it was really uncomfortable. It was the worst part of the job was losing. It was horrible. One
of the things we should point out is that this really isn't a sports book. It's a business book.
It's kind of a hybrid, yeah.
And to that end, I want to ask about the relationship you had with your chairman of the board, Larry Tannenbaum, whom you are candid enough to say, you guys didn't, I don't know, was it you didn't speak?
We were pretty estranged for a year.
You were pretty estranged for a year. How does the chairman and his 2IC, how do you run a business like MLSE when you don't talk for a year?
Well, no, we talked, but I started working with Larry in 92, 93 to bring basketball to town. We'd stayed friends. He was instrumental in them appointing me the CEO when the Leafs bought the Raptors. So we talked, but the affection and the closeness and the candor disappeared for a year. It still worked it out. And also, Larry was not my boss. I reported to the board of directors. Larry was a non-executive chairman. So I reported to teachers and TD. And actually, I'm glad I did because I think Larry was so angry with me. If he had his way, he would have fired me then.
Are you back on track now?
Oh yeah, we've been fine. I mean, for years it was reported we were still estranged. You know, we sat down, talked it over, talked about where we made mistakes, and we got on with it, and now we're still close friends.
Let me ask you about what has been a business strategy for the National Hockey League for as long, I think, as Gary Bettman has been the commissioner, and that is this Southern strategy, deep commitment to seeing hockey succeed in places like Tampa, Miami, Dallas, Phoenix, non-traditional hockey markets. Do you think that's wise?
There's a couple of them I don't get at all. Why Gary was so loyal to Phoenix, I don't know. Now, Phoenix, they finally sold it, and I believe they can't move it for 5 years, but I don't think it'll work. And you just saw Florida Panthers change for about the third time in 7 years, and I've known all
change
the
what? Ownership?
Change ownership. Mm-hmm. Sorry. And you know, the new is, I sent out a tweet that got a lot of attention that said, you know, God bless those young, aggressive, rich new owners, because they haven't experienced losing yet. And every new owner that goes into the Panthers thinks, I'm going to be the one that turns it around. I can remember Viner, who was the owner just previous, I had dinner with him one night, and he's all pumped out. This is going to work. Within a year, he knows he's losing his shirt. So I think this franchise, it just does not work.
So shut him down?
Yeah, I would. I mean, there's better markets, and you know, probably go back into Seattle. I don't know whether Kansas City will work, but definitely Quebec City.
If you build them an arena.
Well, Quebec City's already broken ground, so they're building an arena.
How much taxpayers' money is going into that?
That one, I think, is almost all taxpayers. I don't think Pellado is paying a penny.
How do you figure that? The guy's a billionaire, and he's got the taxpayer
I don't quite get Katz either in Edmonton, because he's a wealthy guy and a good owner, but he's still must be getting 60 cents on the dollar from the province and
the city.
And I'm not for that. I mean, as I said in my book, we spent about $1 billion, and all but about $55 million. We spent $1 billion. $55 million came from us. We did it all ourselves, and that's the model I like.
Almost no taxpayer money into the Air Canada Centre then?
Zero. Plus pays $13 million of realty taxes a year. Which is not the norm. And you might say, well, it should be the norm. Well, it's not the norm in North America, especially in the United States. Here are the keys. Here's a new building, here are the keys.
I want to ask you, in this segment of our conversation we'll call Fanatics, first three letters being F-A-N, which is what this is all about, right? It's for the fans. But you point out you got death threats while you did your job. You pointed out that 2 fans were shot in a parking lot at Candlestick Park in San Francisco. Apparently a San Francisco Giants baseball fan beaten in a...
Still in a coma to this day?
...parking garage of Dodger Stadium. When the Raptors basketball team drafted Charlie Villanueva in 2005, you heard one fan say, this is the worst day of my life. Do we take sports too seriously?
Well, the word fan comes from the word fanatic, and so that when someone over the top, crazy. There are some fans. Most of them don't. I mean, God bless them. The avidity is wonderful. I mean, it's part of your identity. It's your mood on Monday morning, win or lose, around the water cooler. I think that's all good. There are just some that go over the top and do crazy things. But you know what? We're seeing more of that in your area. In politics, there's this group now, a lot of people call them the trolls, that can hide behind social media and do just unspeakable things, say unspeakable things. And maybe and we see it in politics in the US, I mean, just hateful stuff. There's such a polarization. So I don't think it's just fans, maybe it's North America now, and Europe.
Not going away, though. So
no, maybe getting worse.
What do you do about it? You have to protect players? Is security a bigger issue?
No, you do that now anyhow.
Yeah.
No, the security's pretty good. I think it's getting worse. Just players should not be on Twitter and not go on websites and stuff, and probably a lot of people shouldn't.
The last question I'm going to ask is not going to come as a surprise to you, because it's the question that everybody who's done your job gets asked, and that is, do you think the Maple Leafs are ever going to win a Stanley Cup in your lifetime?
Well, I hope to live a long time, and
you have to in order to see that happen.
Well, I think so. I mean, I say in my book that if they'd kept Berkey, I think he would win him a Stanley Cup. You know, it's not so crazy. 2-3 years ago, LA won the Stanley Cup, got in 8th in the West, got hot goaltending and won it. And I can tell you, I was working in the NHL then. Nobody was predicting they were going to win that. They're not a favorite. I mean, the Boston, the Chicagos are the favorites. The couple of great teams on the West Coast are the favorites. But you never know. And do I think they'll do it in my lifetime? Yes, absolutely.
And you're 67 now, so how long will you have to live for in order to see that happen?
Well, I always answer a lot of questions with that. I don't speculaate on that.
But it's been, what, it's the longest drought
67,
now.
yeah.
40.
Well, there's lots of teams who haven't won at all. So,
right.
Yeah.
But
it's a long drought.
It's a long drought.
Yeah.
Is that
but you know what, I think people think the whole time has been horrible. Cliff Fletcher had some good times. Pat Quinn and Ken Dryden, we were right in there. We got to the Eastern Finals 2 times. I think I looked once for a time frame that there were 4 teams that played the most amount of home playoff games. We were like the 4th, the other 3 had won the Stanley Cup. We were knocking at the door in a couple of those days.
My kids ask me this question all the time. Dad, are the Leafs going to win the Stanley Cup? And I say, not in my lifetime, but hopefully yours. Hopefully I'm wrong about that.
I'm more optimistic than you.
I hope so. Richard Peddie, the name of the book's called Dream Job, My Wild Ride on the Corporate Side with the Leafs, the Raptors, and TFC. Good to have you into our studios tonight. Thanks so much.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.